great to meet you. Great to see you. Thank you for making it here today. We're going to talk a little bit about things that go beyond generative AI and kind of predictive capabilities that AI is really kind of producing for us, not just as a company, but as an industry. You know, Erica mentioned kind of the early days of the internet. I've actually been in technology for 30 years, which is mind-blowing because I don't think I've really been in industry for that long until I looked in the mirror and then I realized, yeah, it's been about 30 years. But literally the conversation about the internet was working with Nike, and when they told me they would never sell a pair of shoes online ever because it would compete with Foot Locker. That's kind of the early days of the internet. And what I would tell you in addition to that is that there was this hype cycle. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but I remember 2 years in, this is like 94, 95, 96. Now I know this is when Jay says I was in 3rd grade or something like that. But there was a backlash. The internet's not going to be big. It's not going to be big. AT&T's going to do something better. I feel the AI backlash happening already. So, you know, I had a slide that was, you know, AI, blah, 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 because everybody says AI. But it's really about what it can do for you. So I'm going to maybe present a couple slides to you about kind of what it means and what it actually is going to change. And I definitely, are you feeling the AI fatigue yet? Anybody? No? Like everybody slaps AI like they're doing something onto whatever it is. What's interesting is that we've been doing what I would call machine learning neural networks from the day we were founded. So we were founded 16 years ago, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of our evolution, but we were founded 16 years ago, and the first thing we did within the first 6 months is hire data scientists. And then we built a data science team. So we've been investing in what is now AI. And by the way, back then I wouldn't call it AI because I thought it was grandiose and kind of conversation that AI is something bigger than neural networks and machine learning. But we've invested from early days of kind of the company. And so what I really think is powerful about where we are and what's going to happen, and which says on the slide now, which is the power of prediction. And prediction isn't generative AI, although we leverage generative AI, and there's a huge value to it. But the things that I'm going to talk more about is how prediction can drive better results, and how prediction and precision of those predictions are actually going to fill some of the gaps that are starting to happen in the market with things like privacy and other things. And why is now a good time to try? So I'll start with, though, data. Because I think we've talked a lot about data. Really, data's been the lifeblood of marketers. So for the last 50 years, 100 years, really in the last 30 years, the acceleration of kind of performance and marketing has really been about data, about understanding consumers, making better decisions, personalizing messaging, kind of creating segmentation, those types of things. So it's really been about data and marketing. And you know, these are some of the statistics that data-driven companies will see. You know, 40% improvement in revenue from personalization. Based on, hey, I know who you are, you're my customer, you bought these products, you know, here's the next product you should buy. Leading marketers leveraging first-party data see a much better return than people that aren't leveraging their first-party data. And it's shocking how many companies I talk to that really aren't getting the most out of their first-party data. And then campaign optimization. If you start, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but if you start with a better position of understanding your audience and then optimize, you're going to get better performance. All things that make a lot of sense. But there's really big challenges with data. So kind of the data challenges are abound in the market. And so what do I mean by that? First of all, the volume of data being created every day is beyond human comprehension. So 2.5 quintillion, just to give you an idea, 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 24 months. 90% in the last 24 months, right? So the volume of data and actually leveraging that data is almost impossible for human beings. In addition, and Eric already had this statistic up here, but the cost of poor quality data, so using the wrong data, using bad data, costs the economy over $3 trillion. And beyond that, integrating the number of data sources that a marketer needs to use, on average 12 data sources, how do you synthesize that data? how do you get a kind of a view of an individual based on all the different data sources you're trying to aggregate and then leverage in your day-to-day marketing? Really difficult. And then the last thing is, systems weren't built for this real-time world. These microseconds of attention span that we as consumers now are kind of known for. And our attention span is really short, right? So our systems weren't built for that. And definitely the data to drive those is really difficult to achieve. Beyond that, there's human challenges. And the human challenges are things like privacy, right? So we as consumers, we want a personalized experience, but we don't want you to know anything about us, right? We want better offers, but we don't want you to know why we want a better offer, or where we went on a trip, or what things we want, what we want tomorrow. So that's a huge challenge for marketers. And it's kind of in contradiction to itself, right? But that's the reality. There's more privacy laws than ever. And the US is probably one of the most, it's not probably, it's one of the most free, kind of privacy-friendly countries in the world, but still a major challenge. And then there's this fallacy. Gartner wouldn't call it a fallacy, but Gartner helped promote this idea of customer 360. Like, I'm going to know everything about every customer. There's going to be no data gaps in what I know. That's impossible. It's a fool's errand. And the reality is companies have spent a huge amount of money and will never achieve this. And I do respect Gartner for coming out and saying, by 2026, 80% of people are going to abandon this because it's not possible. It's not possible. So, prediction. Prediction, in a lot of these cases, replaces data. Right? Prediction actually predicts the result that you want instead of just predicting or understanding the data that you have, the demographics. And prediction is innately human. We as human beings want to understand what's going to happen next. We want to go predict what happens next. In fact, for centuries, we go to psychics and tarot card readers and palm readers and try and understand, when will I get married? How many kids will I have? Where will I live? All these things that make us kind of human. And today, even today, you can go around the corner and find a psychic, right? So we as human beings want to know this. Well, businesses are no different. Just psychic for a different purpose, right? How do I find more people that look like my best customer? When will they buy? What will they buy? Why will they buy? Which customers are going to churn? Right? These are the predictions that drive business performance. So what I would propose is that prediction is the brain that drives performance. If data is the lifeblood, prediction is the brain that drives the performance. So enter AI. We've already talked about AI a little bit, but why is AI powerful? Like I said, this backlash is going to come. It's already coming, in my opinion. We embraced the term AI a long time ago, and you'll see it not go away in our marketing, but become a little less prevalent. And we'll talk about Ray, which is Resonate AI. But AI is going to drive, and already is driving, great performance, as Erica talked about. So you can see the statistics here. 83% of early adopters are already seeing benefit. That's a massive return in a very short period of time. Software market's going to grow to $120 billion, $150 billion in annual savings in the United States just next year, or is that 2 years? But it's very kind of apparent that AI is going to have an impact. And everybody says AI, which I've already covered. So enter the power of prediction that drive performance. So AI prediction is really about pattern recognition, personalization at scale, and automated outcomes. So how do you drive these three solutions as examples through better AI or better understanding? So why is predictive now? Data science work for a long time. People have done analytics for a long time. But why is now different? And I really think it's the convergence. Having been in the industry, in the technology industry for 30 years, it's really this convergence. So technology is dramatically different than it was even 15 years ago. First of all, we talked about scale data. big data was a big conversation 15 years ago. Everybody talked about big data. And everybody realized there's nothing to do with big data, so they talked about little data. Because you need usable data, not just big data. Well, today, through data science and things like embeddings, if you've heard of embeddings, it's basically the ability to take massive volumes of data and make it small and usable. These things are kind of creating opportunities where we can take this big data, make it small data, and leverage the power of that big data in models. Massive compute. So the on-demand compute from AWS and Google Cloud and Azure makes what was almost impossible 10 or 15 years ago hundreds of dollars for an individual. Right? It's just really simple acceleration. LLMs is the translation layer. So I think LLMs and generative AI is the reason AI is taken off. Not because of the capability, but because for the first time, individual people feel like they've interacted with AI and get a result from AI. It's not just data scientists in the back room. Any increasing sense of privacy or concern for privacy will drive people to do more prediction versus trying to collect the data itself. So, what about all the companies out there that's been in the business of data and doing some of these things in the past? Well, the big challenge is the existing data companies, the companies that have been around for hundreds of years, some of them, like the Experian and the Equifaxes, they weren't designed for kind of this new generation of data and predictive capabilities. In fact, does anyone know what a mainframe is? I'm going to date myself really. And a large percentage of what they do is still run on mainframes. There's no way you can do kind of advanced computing that we do today on mainframes. So technologically very challenged. In addition to that, they're going to have to give up some of their revenue. As a public company, it's really hard to give up revenue. So they've got some business challenges to address. The consulting companies have done it a different way. They've hired armies of data scientists. They spend 4 to 6 months building specific models, and then they hand over the model, and that's the end. Right? Now, the problem is, really what we need is automation. We need these models to learn. We need these models to actually get better without people having to train those models, which is something we've invested significantly in. So, one of the things that I'm not sure I ever told many of you the kind of origination story of Resonate, but when we built the company, our goal was to understand why people make decisions. The things that makes us innately human. Our values, our beliefs, our motivations, the things that kind of make us unique, not our demographics, not just our interests. And we realized to do that, we had to predict those things. So when I said we had a data science team early on, it was because we wanted to predict things that no one else could understand or collect. So that's what we started to build. And because of that, it allows us to do really unique things with kind of prediction and precision. So let's talk about precision. So precision is the accuracy and reliability of an AI model. So making the prediction, generating insights. It also has very specific ways to measure that success. So things like F1 scores, AUC, ROC scores, a number of different scores, but it's really about making sure you understand how precise your model is, because your precision is what's going to drive the performance. So, if you get really good, you can predict behaviors 85% of the time. You can make decisioning that actually improves performance by 19% to outperform competitors. And the AI models can actually improve marketing efficiency by 30%. So these are all data points that we've been able to see when we've done different work with different clients. So imprecision is the exact opposite. It basically negatively impacts your business, right? So a couple of numbers to think about. So JP Morgan invested in kind of decisioning around AI and modeling, and saw between a 50 and 250% improvement across acquisition, customer value, and digital servicing. Netflix, 80% of the shows that you watch are actually predicted that you would want to watch. So it saves them a huge amount of money. And 15.7 trillion is projected to be coming from kind of AI and GDP in just 2030. So just around the corner. So let me give you an example of the traditional approach versus kind of the Ray approach or the AI approach. So traditional approach is you do regular segmentation. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, it's very demographic driven, right? So, so you're going to have 4 or 5 segments. You're going to see a lift of 10 to 15%. But the reality is you're not going to get much better than that. And you're going to start treating everybody like millennials or Gen Zs. And the reality is they're on very different life stages, very different places in their life. However, if you can use modeling, you can do micro-segmentation and really get down to the kind of reason that people are going to buy and segment them out in a way that's going to drive performance. So here's a quick case study. This really, like last 2 weeks, one of our customers shared this with us. So this is around advertising, and they have a campaign where, kind of a unique campaign, where they wanted to reach people that were going to have surgically implanted lenses. Kind of a unique audience, tough audience, right? Because and to make it even a little bit more difficult, to get insurance to cover, you have to have an astigmatism or myopia, so you have to have a condition. So our customer ran this campaign, and they ran against things that they had been optimizing for a year. One in programmatic, another in Meta. Within the first month, you can see the statistics. We drove 2 times the conversion rate, 23% more efficient in the cost per conversion, and that's after being optimized for a year. And then in Meta, with all the auto optimization, we saw a 3-time improvement in the speed in which the conversion happened, which really highlights that you're reaching not just the right audience, but the audience that wants to engage and have this service, have this kind of solution, right? So 3 times faster, which obviously kind of does 2 things. 1, it accelerates your time to revenue as a company. And 2, it actually decreases your spend because you don't have to market them 5, 6, 7 times in that time frame. So in less than a week, with no optimization, just running our prediction, we outperformed what they had done for over a year. So AI is transforming marketing. Ray is transforming marketing. How we refer to Ray and how we think about this infrastructure that we built, which I'll talk a little bit more about, is Ray remembers the past. It knows the present. It can describe the present. So what's happening today. Most importantly, it can predict the future. So what's going to happen tomorrow? Who's going to take some action? Right? That's how we view Ray, and it's the infrastructure that we built. I'm going to go through this pretty quick because this gets into some detail about what we've actually built, which is this automated prediction engine. And in fact, today we use this automated prediction engine to deliver attributes on people, to predict kind of if they're going to buy. Tomorrow, we're going to, and when I say tomorrow, in less than a month, we're going to release a number of different offerings. They're going to go well beyond the things that we're talking about today. In fact, I'll talk about that in a second. But really, to do this, we had to build a scaled, large data modeling infrastructure that allows us to take all that data I mentioned and compress it into very usable data. And we built a foundational model. So if you think about foundational model, LLMs, ChatGPT uses foundational models that basically plug in other use cases or secondary models into that foundational model. So we built our own embeddings, which makes that data very usable. We've built a foundational model that then we can plug in secondary or kind of specialist models. And this specialist model can predict anything. So today, for instance, we have 15,000 data points on each consumer. Each one of those is predicted. Each one of those can be challenged or kind of validated against the ground truth. So if you think about it, there's 15,000 models that are being updated on a continuous basis, and those are really the specialist models. The foundational model is what's kind of giving you this ability to do those things, and we can automate this process. And we can basically take any ground truth and turn this into a prediction on any individual. So today, a lot of our ground truth is either based on direct observed behavior or survey-based research. So we ask tens of thousands of people, and then we can predict those same things. If people didn't take the survey, is this true about them? Do they value spending time with their family? So that's kind of the output. Tomorrow, and really tomorrow is today for us, is we can take any data input. So for instance, I was talking to someone at Walmart, and they said, listen, well, we have 1 million people that bought Tide Pods. We know everything about them. Well, we can replace that ground truth in our model and predict everybody who's going to buy Tide Pods. We can take anybody that had a condition, maybe they had cancer, and predict people that will have cancer. And we can do things that gets back to that business value I talked about. Predict from your first party, your CRM, who's going to churn. What's your next best action with that person? Who's your next best customer? So any data input, building this infrastructure allows us to predict anything on any individual, from your customers to your prospects, and you don't need privacy data that would be considered privacy concern. So Ray answers any question about any individual with precision and cost effectively. So these are literally things or data points that we have that a number of our different customers use. Some are specific to them. So, will you take your kids out of school to go on a vacation? So this helps in those areas that people need to fill maybe a park or a vacation, some type of a destination when kids are in school. And so we can identify each person. So whether it's Vacation Vic or Leanne Leslie, Lean Leslie, right? Leanne too. Idealist Irene, which she's looking for an electric car. And we can take that data and not only understand and identify who those people are, but most importantly is to take action against that understanding. So we can push that understanding back into your CRM database, into your prospect list. We can create personalization. So doing real-time personalization for unknown visitors to a website, for instance. People that you've never interacted with before. Or obviously digital advertising, where we spend a lot of time in our history. I'm going to cover one last subject very quickly, which is predicting the US presidential election. So we, for fun, started predicting the presidential election. Literally for fun, because there was no money behind us predicting it, and we just said, let's take a look at the data and see if we can predict the outcome of the election. And what you find is it's hard, and a lot of people get it wrong. The best experts get it wrong. So, what does conventional data say about the US presidential election? And I'm going to talk a little about what's happened in the past. So we've predicted, well, I'll get this in a second. Does anybody know who Nate Silver is? Okay. He was one of the 100 most influential people based on Time Magazine because of his ability to predict the results of elections. And he used polls and he used analytics to kind of predict the results. Right now, by the way, yesterday he predicted that Trump was going to win by just under 64% likelihood to win. So, but he is like the gold standard in predicting elections. So, we've predicted two. 2016, 2020, we correctly predicted 47 out of 50 states and a win for Trump. And in 2020, we predicted Biden. We even predicted Maine and Nebraska, who are split, not a winner-take-all state. We actually predicted both of those being kind of split. And in fact, Nebraska 2, everybody knows about Nebraska 2, one electoral vote. Nebraska 2 had only gone Democratic once in its history, but our prediction was it was going to go blue. It was going to go for Biden. So, what did Nate Silver say? Well, this is the day of election prediction from Nate Silver. So he had Clinton winning 301 to 235, and a 71.4% chance of winning the election, that Hillary's going to win. So I already mentioned that we got 47 out of 50, but I thought it'd be kind of interesting to go even a little deeper. So we accurately predicted that Trump was going to win, which was counter to what everybody thought. Myself and one of my co-founders, I don't usually tell this story, but we naked shored the market, because the market doesn't like surprises. And in 3 hours, the market was down huge. We thought we were geniuses. And the market opened up, and we were not quite so smart. So that's about having good data and using making bad decisions. But we were wrong 3 times. But we were wrong and where we were wrong was 0.1% to 1.4%. So we were wrong. We weren't massively wrong. We were right overall. And compared to the gold standard, we were much better. And one of the very few companies we're talking about Trump winning in 2016. So let's look at 2020. And by the way, this is where polling was dead. In 2012, I said polling was dead, and it's still around, so I'm not a very good prognosticator, but it should be dead. So this was literally post the election. Wired magazine talked about Miami-Dade County and how Trump improved among Hispanic voters. So when you get really good at predictions, you can predict things that are really in really small geographies, really down to the individuals. So we predicted that Biden would get 55%. And he got 55% in Miami-Dade. So 100% accurate, right? Dead accurate. And he won by 9% margin because there was some third party and some write-ins. So we predicted 9%. So dead on in a very relatively small geography. But this little data point below is the one that I think is the most important, which is Clinton had won by 30 points. And so not only did we predict that he was going to win and we got it right, but we also predicted that it was going to be a massive change from last time. And based on the Hispanic vote and others, and that was all prediction. We did no polls. Right? So one little last one, which is Georgia. Georgia still comes up in the 2020 election. It's still a conversation. That's why the governor of Georgia won't endorse Trump. Biden won by 0.23%. Almost 5 million votes. 12,000 votes. So we weren't perfect. We were at 0.5%. Right? But out of 5 million votes, and compared to Nate Silver, he was way off, like 1.2%. That's a massive miss. I mean, not massive, but it's a miss. Right? But what does this mean? Out of almost 5 million votes cast, we missed the result by 14,000 votes. Out of 5 million cast votes. And that's really what the power of prediction can give you. That precision and accuracy that allows you to understand what's going to happen in the future before it actually happens. So, I'm a big fan of exposing when you're wrong and when you're right. So we were wrong sometimes, right? We're not perfect. What's amazing, and I had a graphic that I didn't put up, is looking at the models that we use now compared to 2020 and how much even better it would be today, right? So it's just getting better. We've invested over $100 million into our infrastructure. So we've done it to automate the things we're talking about. Oh.
What about this year?
What's that?
What's the current prediction?
So here's, I try to get away from it. So we will make the prediction. Here's what I will tell you. It's not decided. So one thing I can tell you is looking at the data is that Kamala is below where Biden was right now as far as kind of support. So she's trending to do worse. That doesn't mean she wouldn't win. But we will start making predictions as we get closer because what we see is events and kind of perceptions impact how people are going to vote. In fact, am I out of time?
No, you're good. I'm saying tonight is the debate.
Oh, I know tonight's the debate. Well, no, I wasn't going to talk about the debate. 2016, 2 weeks before the election, our day said Hillary was going to win. Like she was going to win. There was like no doubt she was going to win. And what we can do is tie events to changes in people's, what we predict is their actions. And the thing that really hurt her, the last thing that hurt her, was Comey coming out in the last week. It had a material impact in the result of that election. That's what our data said. And we'll go back, by the way, and we'll do this election too, and we'll show how controversies or debates impact how people are going to vote. But you know, all that really matters is that last day, right? Those come into the last day. So we are going to make our prediction, and we'll live and die by the prediction. But hey, Nate Silver's not any better than the weatherman. So like I figured we've got him beat already, right? So worst case, we miss one. We're not going to miss one. But listen, at the end of the day, what does this really mean? It really means that if you use the power of kind of prediction and with precision, you'll drive much better results from a marketing perspective. You know, an additional 15 to 20% increase in marketing ROI, improved customer engagement. I think there's a huge opportunity here. Customer retention. So one of the things that we will launch is this ability to dynamically predict churn of your customer. And so one of the things that we'll be talking about in the very near term, which I wasn't supposed to talk about today, but literally that within 72 hours, we're going to be able to predict who's going to churn in your customer base. And we can dynamically update that understanding on a daily, monthly, weekly basis and take into account the things I talked about. Macro environmental issues, right? Internal concerns. You know, are you Toyota and your brakes are failing? What does that mean for you? Those types of predictions. So Ray, we like to talk about our Resonate AI, is about harnessing the power of precision to increase customer lifetime value. Because at the end of the day, our perspective, my perspective, is customer lifetime value is the ultimate metric. It encompasses winning new customers, growing those customers, retaining those customers. And so my question for you and for the market is, you know, what will Ray do for your business? You know, what can we do to accelerate your performance and your results? So besides predicting the election, any other questions?
I have a comment, sorry. So evidence can impact the perception that then impacts
The result.
right. So in that case, the reaction to polling actually becomes
No one cares about the polls.
no.
One is we look at the data and look at when, first of all, there's too many, right? And there's too many ones that are on the left and from the right have biases. And people barely engage with the news, much less the polls, right? In fact, if you're in a younger generation, you're engaging with YouTube to get your news. Like you're not, that's where you're getting your news. Maybe TikTok. But the polls really, from what we've seen, don't have major impacts. You know, big stories. The last debate had a major impact, right? To the point where they changed. You know, not in politics. Changed who's actually running.
Yeah.
But no, polls we haven't seen have a big impact. If you think about polls, you're asking. You talk about small data and big data. You're asking 1,000 people. You're asking 2,000 people. Just recently, they were calling on landlines. At least now they're using mobile phones, right? I mean, are you surprised that there's bias if you're calling landlines? I mean, does anybody have a landline? I mean, right. So the polls don't really have a big impact. At least not that we've seen. No, they're talking points for news people. Yeah.
More softball question this time.
Oh, perfect.
So love this. Can totally see how this works. But what is the data inputs that you're using for the predictions? Like if somebody fresh comes to my website, never seen them before, they are completely, it's on Safari, no cookie information or anything. How is that prediction happening? Is it the time of day? Like what's and maybe we don't know, but in theory, what are the data sources that are driving that?
So you're saying we have no ability to have any idea on that person
Well,
at
and
all?
maybe this is a situation where it's not because I actually don't know the product that well, but let's give that example. How do you predict churn? Random person arrives on Safari anonymously on the site. Is that a situation where prediction can still be made, or maybe that's not the optimal situation?
It can be made, but it's made on much coarser data. which means it lacks as much precision.
But
as
so
a
in a
genuine person.
situation where it's like it's an identified person.
Yeah, or worst case, you're using kind of household level kind of metrics, right? So you're not the individual, but you're using kind of household level data to make that prediction, which is not going to be as precise as knowing that this is the person. We use both online and offline data sources for our modeling and our prediction. For churn, we actually start. I'm getting way ahead of myself, so I'm sure there's no product. We do have product people in the audience. So for churn, how it'll work is that a customer will upload 10% of their file, identify half of those people as people that churn, and the other half, we won't know anything. We'll connect all that data, that infrastructure we bought, that we built, I should say, and built, and then predict the half they didn't tell us. And if we can outpredict their own prediction engines or how they spent, how they can predict churn, then it's a very fast test to demonstrate the result. So in that scenario, it's really about CRM.
Gotcha. Okay, so this is like lookalike modeling.
Oh, I bristle at lookalike model. You can use the same concept, yes. I mean, it's much more individual prediction than a lookalike. And part of the reason I say that is because lookalikes typically rely on some really basic factors or a minimal number of data sets to be able so gender, income, and things like that. No, these look like those people. We're actually predicting the person, not just saying they look like this person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. We can talk more. Yeah.
So this slide, there's a before and after. They talked about like broad audiences versus
The segments.
precise microsegments.
Yeah.
So from like a digital marketing perspective, it's a lot harder to target microsegments over time, and there's a little bit of challenge to scale. So you talk a lot about efficiency.
Yeah. Yeah. How we kind of view microsegments is that it still adds up to the overall segment. So what I'm just saying is instead of 4 or 5 segments, you have 20. But it's, from a scale perspective, in aggregate, it's that you're delineating the difference between those audiences. The challenge, I think, that still exists is really around creative and messaging to those segments and the amount of dynamic creative you can do in that scenario. What creative messaging can be auto-generated. But that is going to be a problem that gets solved. I mean, it's already easier today than it's been, but the segments themselves are just a deeper identification of what's going to motivate this group versus this group and this group. Now, the messaging matters in that conversation. But, so, in aggregate, it's not that it gets the audience gets so small, it's that how do you kind of delineate the messaging between the two. So if I'm selling a car, and instead of having 5 segments that I'm kind of selling the cars to, I have 20, right? And I know that these people care about safety and performance together, but these people only care about cost and brand. Then I can market to them a little bit differently, and I can still the buyer universe is still the same, but I'm segmenting them kind of more discreetly. But there is a creative challenge to that.
Yeah, so we usually
It's still a challenge. And this is not why we predicted any Nebraska 2, but we worked with a client.
Could you repeat the question? It was hard to.
How do you get scale out of microsegments, basically? And my comment was that in aggregate, it still adds up to a big universe, but creative for those microsegments is still some of the biggest challenges we see. So that was the question. One thing I just mentioned is that in Nebraska 2, as I mentioned, we predicted it was going to go to Biden. It only happened once. We had a client that was focused on Nebraska 2. And I would say they were probably one of our clients that engaged us. Some of the support team would say they were just over the top and demanding, but I would say they were great clients that really asked great questions. In a very small geography, they had over 100 different creatives for different messaging. video, not just display, like video. But they literally, we created a misery index. We created a bunch of different really unique microsegments that really accelerated kind of hitting the right people with the right message. And that those campaigns won some awards for kind of being so creative and so unique around micro-targeting and then delivering a result. I mean, at the end of the day, I think Biden won by like 10%. So it was a massive win. And a story that I was told never to tell, but I'm going to tell it anyway, just briefly, and then if there's any other questions, I'll take it. Ron Klain, you guys probably don't know who Ron Klain is. So Ron Klain was the chief of staff of Biden. And one of the people we were working with for NE2 is friends with Ron Klain. And so about 4 or 5 days before the election, Ron Klain said, we're never going to win NE2. And NE2 is like 269 to 269. The decision is NE2, 270 to 269. Like it's that kind of important. So Ron Klain said, we're not going to win NE2. And the consultant said, listen, because you're not allowed to talk between campaign and PACs. He said, listen, I think you might win NE2, but we can't talk about it. And so the results come in, and actually if there's a little 10-minute documentary out there, we didn't do it, but it's interesting about where NE2 looked like was going to be the decision for the election. But the night of the election, Ron Klain, the chief of staff, called the consultant and thanked him that he didn't think it would ever happen, but the reality is that it went for Biden. So I was told not to tell this story. I'm not sure why. Any other questions? I know I'm way over time. Yeah.
Yeah, I had one. Along a similar line with the microsegments, like for your example of the like laser eye surgery or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not super surprised to perform those meta because like a lot of the time in school actually use the listening audience versus just the interest audience is when it's like a super niche target. I guess my question's kind of in the lines of like the AI and like the generative type made me think of something like a lot of the times we're looking for a super niche audience, but it's not available. Do you envision like a future of like you basically using prompts to create those niche audiences within your tool? Like, is that a capability you're working on? What would the challenges to that be?
We have it.
Yeah, okay.
So we have the ability to do that today. Right now the challenge is for us is it takes 3 or 4 weeks, and sometimes that's not fast enough. That's really not about the processing and the actual prediction engine. It's really about collecting the data, processing the data, putting the data in, and then predicting. But we do it today. In fact, a number of those things I talked about, like taking kids out of school to go on vacation, is a very specific. It was exactly the use case. Like, hey, this is what I need to know. Great, we can create that data scale. And then we can populate your CRM with that data and your prospect list. And what we've shown is we can outperform their own loyalty data to drive people in that example for this customer to come to the park that have kids when school's in session. So even the people who are most loyal to this brand, we outperform when it comes to kind of during school getting people to take their kids out of school.
So for like a use case, is that something where I'd have to email my rep and ask them to help out with that versus like just building it myself in the platform?
Yes, yes. It's not something today where you can go in and just create the question. We had this concept of ask Ray, and then Ray will give you the result, right? And today it's not it's not like you can write the question into the platform and get and then auto-populate. That is the goal. There's also some realize of how you write a question to get the best results. So even in that scenario, we would still go, listen, here's how we want to refine that. You go with that because this is going to give us the best prediction. Yeah, but if you have something specific, yes, we can absolutely do that. Any other questions? All right, well, look for our prediction on the election. It's coming. Probably a few weeks out because things keep changing. So, all right, thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to ask our panel to come on up. Why don't you guys?